Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip Trickle Flow Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. Hey, Tony, how are you today?
Great. How are you, Melissa?
I am pretty good. This is a wildly busy week, but I'm super excited to talk about our topic today, which is 240 paychecks. So you found this article and brought it. So let us know first what this is. What is this concept?
Yeah. So, my Google feed sends me all sorts of different things to look at. And it said 240 paychecks. And it's through the kiplinger.com. And it's an article about having 240 paychecks in retirement. And it's essentially people, assuming people retire at age 65 and they live for 20 years to age 85, they need 240 paychecks to make it through their life. And, they talk in the article about all the different ways that those paychecks could maybe come from, or at least like pretty traditional ways. And I just thought this was a whole interesting concept. I'd never thought of it that way of like, okay, if you want to just keep getting these paychecks once a month and you've set it up so you're getting a paycheck that's in line with what you plan on spending for your retirement years, once you establish enough money or cash flow, you can do it. So that's where this came from. And it was just an interesting concept that I hadn't really thought of before. And it was a good article. I thought it touched on a lot of different things. But then it just kind of got me thinking about Drip Trickle Flow Flood and how that could play into having a paycheck and just evolving from there.
Yeah, I think it was very interesting too, because often when we have these conversations of what does it look like between ages 65 and 85, let's say, it's usually centers around Social Security and pensions. And not to put a damper on our episode, of course, but we don't know where those things are going to be. And by the time, let's say you and I, Tony, are ready to collect. That's why Drip Trickle Flow Flood is so important, because we need to take more control over this. I thought the article was interesting too, because it was outlining some different and unique ways maybe that folks can bring in income, but also I think that's something we can speak to is, how do we get out of that space of just relying on assistance from Social Security and pension, and what does that look like?
Yeah. And Social Security, I guess, who knows? Pensions, if you're in a job that has a pension, that's cool.
Yeah.
It seems like those occupations are maybe becoming fewer and fewer, or at least a smaller percentage of the overall population. I know I have some firefighter friends and they talk about their pensions, and I'm always kind of envious that they're gonna have that in place. So yeah, if we're start talking outside of those things, kind of the other pretty common things they were talking about were annuities, which annuities can be kind of controversial just based off of kind of the rate they pay out and whether that would actually be a wise investment or not. And I guess I'm not going to speak to that specifically. I'm not an annuities expert by any stretch of the imagination. But then talk about mutual funds and incorporating your IRA and your 401k and all of those different pieces to create that paycheck. But then it got me thinking, well, okay, you have all these traditional ways, but how about all the untraditional ways? And some of them are common, right? Like maybe investment properties, but
Yeah.
then you can start going into intellectual property and those sorts of things that you're creating these income streams at a younger age that are going to carry on throughout. So maybe at your younger age, that extra income is helping you build up some of these pots. And then when you reach retirement, I'm going to say in quotes, those other income streams that you've kept going that have been more of a funnel of income, now maybe it becomes a part of your actual income that you're living off of.
Yeah. We just had an episode with a great guy who is a founder, and I think he brought up something interesting about creating IP, right? So creating So he created a system that he's able to sell over and over that he doesn't physically implement. It's just something that his company or he created. Um, and that's something that can be sold off or not, and is like able to scale and go into multiple, in his case, it was franchisees would be using this system. So he can scale it to all sorts of franchisees all over the United States, which is interesting, right? Because those are things we can think about now is like, how do we create intellectual property? How do we create maybe a patent and then have those assets for later in life that either are working for us or we're able to sell off?
Yeah, and then it gets you. So I have a little bit of a problem with the 240 number. Um, One, I don't think people should have to wait to 65
Hmm.
to, again, when I say retire in quotes because I don't know that I'll ever stop doing things. But
Same.
that idea that you don't have, that, and then also people are living longer. Maybe you need 300 paychecks, maybe you need 500 paychecks, but I like the concept of creating that paycheck, and whether that's in the future just for retirement or if that's now, right? And you start creating that paycheck, and that can be used for, maybe it means you scale down the job you're in. You could can't change jobs, or maybe you're just getting a quality of life raise. But by building up those paychecks and thinking of, it really is in line with the drip trickle flow flood. I'm a cash flow person, and that paycheck just mentally is a really interesting way. If you break up your income into that monthly, or you could probably break it down, into weekly if you wanted, how that all can play, as opposed to just saying, okay, I need to save $1 million or $5 million or whatever the number is to live the life I want to live. If you create these paychecks and this income stream, you can start living that life now or set it up for in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point around not waiting till 65. I'm of the same mind as you. I'm also of the same mind as you that I don't think I'll stop
Mm.
working, and I'll put that in quotes because things that often are like maybe some would think are work don't really feel like work to me, which would be like my writing or Gary doing pickleball or things like that, right? Or like is work, but also we would do it no matter what. There's a book that I read years ago that I loved called Work Optional. Have you ever read that?
Uh-uh.
It's this exact concept where it's not about necessarily thinking retirement, thinking when I hit 65, what's going to happen. It's the idea of what we really want is work to be optional, right? So if we want to work, great. If we don't, and maybe that's for a spell of time, maybe that's for a larger stretch of time. But the point is that we have options, and I really love that concept because that's it, right? It's like maybe there are times in our life when we do want to do something, we want to start a business, we want to work in some way, but we don't have to, right? There's no like requirement to do that. So I loved that model. I think it aligns very well with the drip trickle flow flood in the sense of you're building that out because drip trickle flow flood also creates a work optional format and freedom because you're pulling in income from a variety of streams so that you're not reliant on just one thing, which then creates more freedom in your life.
And that's really what set me down that path of creating all these different income streams, was wanting to have that flexibility. The other thing I really like about, the paycheck idea and creating the different income streams is, and just kind of, really proactively thinking about it is, yes, okay, maybe at 65, if you've got X amount of money and you use the 4% rule and you take it out and you can break it up into paychecks, maybe that works. As we've seen in the last few years, it's really hard to predict inflation. It's really hard to predict where it's going to hit in the economy and when, and how much it might impact you individually. And if you just have this one chunk of money, the I watch Survivor, and when that show started, I think like almost 25 years ago or something, you were winning $1 million, and that was a lot of money. And not that $1 million isn't a lot of money, but they're still giving away $1 million. 25 years later, the value of that $1 million is a lot less. And I think just that idea, I remember as a kid, you just had this carrot of, if you have $1 million, all the songs told you you were rich. But where we live, Melissa, $1 million, you're not living in a fancy house. You're not driving a fancy car.
No.
It really is crazy how that has changed. And so I think just planning that paycheck model, and maybe with your paychecks, if it's me and I'm pretty fiscally, I was going to say conservative, but neurotic is probably the better word, that in the paychecks that you're creating, have that paycheck be so there's still a level of ability to maybe save or invest a little bit, so that paycheck can go up over time. And they do talk about that a little bit in the article. They don't disregard inflation. They definitely acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's also a very good point, and can make it difficult when people are planning around a certain nest egg. So we do need more flexible options. Again, drip, trickle, flow, flood. That's why it is so important with this. I'm curious, do you have, without getting into the weeds, you obviously don't have to share anything super specific, but do you have any kind of loose plan around your 240 paychecks? Like, what do you think that sort of stage of your life might look like?
Yeah, no, I have a thought about that. And, Lindsay and I want to travel a lot. And it's funny, they talk in the article of, in retirement, people generally spend less than they do when they're working. And I think we might spend more than we are now,
Hmm.
because, right now we're here, and I spend a lot of time doing things that, well, that are work, or, and I'm doing a lot of things, or even volunteering, that they take so much of my time, which is a great thing. But it means I'm not spending money because I'm at the track, not the horse track, the ice cream track, and, and doing all these things, where in retirement, oh, maybe I'll just be taking long walks on the beach and wandering around in the woods. But I think there's a good chance we'll be eating out more, and probably buying stuff I don't need because I see it and I think it's cool. And I can see that as I have aged, the places I want to stay when I'm traveling have gotten nicer. And so all those things. So yeah, I mean, the idea of that 240 paychecks. I mean, for me, I'm going to need more than that. A, I plan on living past 85, and B, I plan on starting that earlier. And that's why I'm trying to create these streams. And a lot of mine is built around real estate, but I'm also trying to build it around other things. That's why I'm writing books and doing the freelance writing, and I invest in the stock market and all of those things. And I want my paychecks to come from a lot of different places, and part of that is, one, so I'm getting growth in different areas, and then also so that if one of those things goes away, or the plan doesn't work as well as I projected, I don't have all my eggs in one basket, essentially. How about you? What's your
Well,
paycheck world look like?
yeah, I think, well, Gary and I talk about this all the time, that we're like setting up our quote unquote retirement now. But really, it's just, he's actually already doing it. It's like we want to teach the two things that everyone does in retirement, which is pickleball, which Gary already does. And I want to teach dance fitness, which I'm certified. I just don't do it yet because my schedule is insane right now with other money generating things. So we have that like option of, that's definitely what we want to do. more specifically to Gary's pickleball because that's quite fun. I mean, he is at a level where he can train, higher performing players. So it could be a situation where we're traveling and he's coaching or setting up tournaments. Like that could be really fun. We obviously have, and I mean, this won't be here forever, but I think we'll always have, we have a whole, one of those Mercedes Interstates. So it has an Airstream in the back. So we can live in that. That's like a full house at any point if we wanted to. So that's like, not to say we will necessarily, but it's an option. I would like to do some overseas travel as well. One of my friends though, and she loves it. She's on this site. I'll pull the name for our show notes, but it's basically a site where you can go and house sit for people. So you stay in their place for free. And then, so that like takes care of the lodging of wherever you want to go. And she travels to the most incredible places. And then she knows how to flight hack. So she'll get these like flights to Europe for $40 or something. Right. And it's wild. So I'm like, all this is very possible, even if you want to do it on a lower budget. Like you, we are also planning to hopefully live past 85 and retire. I would say work optional earlier. Um, at least, hopefully by like 50, be work optional so that we can do things. But I also feel like I'll always write. So I'm a writer for a living. If this is the first episode that everyone is listening to, I mean, as long as I can flex that muscle in my brain, I'll be a writer for my entire life. So I think that no matter what, that will always bring in income, but that feels quite fun for me in most cases. So that will always be a part of my life and a part of my drip trickle flow flood. But yeah, I think that we see ourselves like, here are little retirement buckets besides all of our financial portfolio and stocks, et cetera, which we're heavily into because of my husband. We'll do pickleball, dance fitness, writing, travel, house sit,
Well,
van.
yeah, I think that's fantastic. I like that you're like, talking about, okay, maybe he's a traveling coach or this. One of the things that I've thought about is if we want to go somewhere for the winter for a little while, maybe I'd get a job coaching. I coach a lot of junior high and high school sports, but I've also thought maybe I go somewhere where there's like a football team, maybe I go down to Arizona and I get a job working at the stadium. I get to go to the football games and, you meet people and, otherwise if we travel somewhere, Lindsay's going to be stuck with just me, which probably will drive her crazy. So, it would also, in addition to creating some income and giving you something to do, it would also, help you meet people in an area. And we've thought about, a lot of the people at the national parks that go work those seasonal jobs are younger.
Mhm.
I was like, maybe that would be a fun, every summer they hire a bunch of people. Maybe that'd be a fun thing to do for a summer.
Yep.
Like, going into the park every year. And, if I could get a job, I don't know, being a tour guide or in the gift shop talking to everybody that came in, that'd probably be fun. And then you'd get to really immerse yourself in that national park. And so, yeah, I think just that whole idea of the work optional, we should probably start using that term instead of retirement, because I don't think
Yeah.
either one of us is really wired for retirement. Um, but
Not with all our
what's funny,
ideas.
my dad retired from being a general contractor after he retired at about age 7. It must have been like 72 actually. And I didn't think he'd be able to do it. And, now he is living the epitome of a retiree's life. He's turning wood bowls and playing pickleball. And I mean, he spends a lot of time with Gary now. And
Yes.
it's really interesting. So it's funny, at age, I guess I'm almost 44 and I can't envision not doing something, but maybe there is a time of life where I don't want to be having the hustle and bustle, and planning the financial future to give you that option, right? That it is really work optional. And maybe that does impact your spending also. And I say we're going to spend more, that may not be forever. I don't know if at age 85, if I'm globetrotting as much as I hope to in my 50s and 60s. So, it's one of those, you don't know what you don't know, but be prepared for whatever might come is really what I kind of took away from this article, was setting up that world,
Mhm.
designing that life. And they use 240, but again, that paycheck could be any number. Yeah.
It's a good foundation for just kind of vision boarding or whatever, anyone likes to do, but it just gets you thinking of like, what do I want my life to look like? And then where would those 240 paychecks come from? I think like where does it come from makes it more fun because you can just think of all the different ways that you can make that up and live your life.
Yeah, and I always say that, drip, trickle, flow, flood can fit into any financial plan, right? And there's all sorts of different models and methods for your finances, right? And this is just to me a fun way, and a very simple way, I guess. It breaks it down monthly, and it gives you something, yeah, that you can envision. And so taking drip, trickle, flow, flood and sticking it to this model is kind of a fun way to look at it. And maybe the floods are harder to envision how that fits in. Those can be a little less predictable, but maybe the floods are earlier on in life and they're funding those future paychecks, kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Or like we talked about earlier, it can be sometimes it can be IP, like
Yeah.
things that you've developed at really any age. I mean, that doesn't have to be earlier in life, but like creating your own IP, which we'll have to do some more of that in future episodes, talking about that more specifically. But, that's a great way you could write a book and sell it. And that can result in a flood. So there's lots of different options.
Yeah, we talk IP often from the writing standpoint, since you and I both do that. But I don't know if we have any inventors out there that want to come on the show. I think that would be a real fascinating thing for me to hear for sure, and probably our listeners, of, what are the different ways that IP can create lasting income?
Yeah, lots of good stuff. Lots of things to noodle on. So now I'm curious from our listeners if you want to share with us after this episode, what does your 240 paychecks look like? And that's less from a nitty gritty standpoint and more from like, what's that big vision? What is your work optional?
Yeah, and what is their number? I guess I would also be curious, how many paychecks do they think they need? What does
Mhm.
that look like? I don't, are a lot of people planning on that 65 to 85 world, or are people looking at younger age or living longer, and what does that look like?
Mhm.
And the social security thing, one thing they mention in here is one of the options is waiting till you're 70. Right now, if you wait till 70, you can get a bigger bump. And
Yep.
I don't know, maybe when we're getting closer to there, that I don't know what that looks like, whether it's there, whether they keep raising that number based off of people living longer. But it is interesting to, how do you come up with that number?
Mm.
And it's probably different for a lot of different people.
That's true. All of our circumstances are wildly different. So if you are a firefighter, you might be like, yep, I am going to collect my pension and my social security
I
and you'll see me on the pickleball court.
Well, I have a good friend, and his plan. He's a firefighter, and he wants to get a little fishing boat.
Mhm.
Yeah, in some tropical place, and he'll take people on fishing tours. So that is one of
Oh,
the options, that I'm his first mate or whatever, and probably means I'm cleaning fish, but I think it would be pretty
well,
fun.
that'll give Lindsay alone time.
Yeah,
Like you
well,
said, she can send
yeah,
you out in the boat.
yeah. Well, he can hang out with his wife, and they'll be having a blast while we're out there.
Exactly. Lindsay's also a part of my work optional. She just doesn't know it yet because her and I are definitely going to open a adorable bookstore somewhere. So she'll have to be part of it. I think we can figure that out. But she has all sorts of cool things as well that I could see her doing just as, again, work optional, like when she feels like it. But she's so great at content creation. She's so good at like in design. She's so great at all those things. So just I can envision lots of fun things happening.
Yeah, and we still need to do some episodes where we get Gary and or Lindsay
Oh,
on,
right. We talk
and
about our spouses and we never bring
yeah,
them
we need
on.
to get them on here to talk about their worlds, because I would say as unconventional as Melissa and I are at times, they're almost the next level of
Yeah.
what they feel like doing and really good at doing what they love and
Mhm.
just doing the things they enjoy. So it's pretty neat.
Yes, they're way more they'd probably be even have an even more fun podcast. Well, I think this was a really fun topic to chat through today. Again, we'd love to hear from everybody. What is your number? Meaning, like, how many paychecks are you planning for? What does a little bit of your vision look like? We'd love to hear those kinds of things. And also we're happy to chat about this topic more if folks are interested. So, with that said, thank you so much for joining us today for Drip Trickle Flow Flood. If you like this episode, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.